All right, we're going to get kicked off here. So thanks for everyone for joining this workshop. By quick intro on my end, I'm Cam, Senior Solution Architect at Arize. What we'll be working through today is a use case specific to churn forecasting. Super exciting to kind of work through this one. It's applicable across a lot of different use cases, more tactically across whether it's a telco company working through renewals on cable bill, your internet, SaaS solutions working through kind of renewing customers as a platform license comes up to renew, or even internally kind of grading employees where we actually going to have turnover as an HR use case. So we'll be working through a demo use case uploaded into my own Arize account. Feel free to please sign up at this link in the chat, app.arize.com. One, you'll have the same exact model, the same exact data to kind of follow along through this workshop. But more importantly, you'll actually be able to send your own model data after this workshop. So you can really explore the full platform to your full extent after this workshop. There's two different ways to interact with me. I'll be relying on a few Arize team members to kind of manage through our Q&A and chat system. You can also give a shout by raising your hand, and I can actually grant you audio permission temporarily, so we can actually have participants live interaction with us. So big or small, please interject. Interactions are always welcomed in these virtual workshops. What we'll do is we'll work through two quick slides around what is ML observability, and then we'll actually start working through that demo troubleshooting work case to kind of explore and actually feel what ML observability for yourself. So if you haven't heard around the term ML observability, you might be familiar with the concept around monitoring and specifically monitoring your models in production. And so as you kind of have particular performance metrics, whether it's as simple as accuracy or AUC or log loss, or a little more mature is tracking model drift, feature drift. Monitoring allows you to know when you hit a threshold. So accuracy might dip to 70% and you want to know. A model might be drifting a little bit and you want to know about that. But really the important part is having a tool that allows you to actually explore and understand why that occurred. Why did accuracy dip off? And that is really what ML observability is all about, is allowing you to kind of go back layer by layer in a very streamlined manner to find the why, so that you can actually retrain your model in an intelligent manner and actually ensure that the problem that you're looking to solve or where exactly your model is struggling with actually gets improved in your next iteration of that model. More tactically, what that looks like in an organization with maybe monitoring that's ad hoc or maybe no monitoring in place is that the alerting becomes a line of business owners. Someone, if we're thinking about a churn model, the kind of business owner says, hey, I've noticed over the last 6 months, we did not forecast for this amount of customers to be churning. We also didn't identify those customers to potentially churn, so we didn't try to actually save them. So we had a large increase in false negatives. Model owner, ML engineer, and that's us. What's going on with our model, because we're costing the business a lot of money right now, because cost of new customer acquisition is very expensive across a lot of different industries. And so what you're going to start doing is you're going to start going maybe back into a notebook. You're going to start exporting data. You might have to transform data so that you can actually visualize and query that data. And then when you find an insight, or maybe you find somewhere you want to further explore within that data set, you're going to have to go back offline, maybe do another export, start doing a lot more SQL queries. And overall, this process, ad hoc as it is, it's really time consuming. It could go from days to weeks. We've had customers say that we spent a month investigating this issue. And when you have a solution like Arize and ML observability, one, you start proactively becoming aware of an issue before it festers and starts costing the business lots of money. And once you become alerted, you also have the confidence in the tooling to actually know, okay, here's actually the isolated issue. This is the real culprit that our model is struggling with. And now I'm informed. I can go back offline. I can retrain my model all before really the top portion, the world without ML observability, even figures out that there is an issue. And so what we're going to do is we're going to move into the platform now and actually see that in action, see how quick it is to actually identify issues within the platform and actually start action on those insights. Before we start the actual demo, I'm going to give it another minute for folks that maybe have joined a little later to sign up if you haven't already, and follow along as we go through the demo. But I'll switch out the screen share here. We'll see Arize up on the screen, and as I mentioned, I'll give it a minute or so to kind of let any folks kind of catch up here. All right. So hopefully you're following along with your own account here. We'll kind of land through, and once you go through the quick start, you can always come back into the quick start flow that you can click through by going to the bottom left corner, click on the rocket ship. It'll kind of restart the flow to help you kind of get your own model data into the platform. But from there, once you kind of go through the quick start guide, this is where you'll land. Kind of here's arize.com. You can see that we have a few different models and model data kind of loaded into this instance, and that's listed across the model list here. And so you can see that we have the churn prediction that we'll work through in just a second. Also worth noting, we have a click-through rate use case that a workshop by a colleague of mine, Dat, will be kind of leading. So feel free to kind of join that one as well. But overall, as you kind of send maybe your own data and your own models into Arize, this is kind of where they'll be listed out here. Anytime we have an alert that's kind of triggered or even enabled, this is where performance, drift, and data quality will start being kind of visualized here. We don't have any monitors set up, and we'll actually kind of work through that process of how to actually set up from day one when I start utilizing Arize. Left side here is around kind of macro navigation within the platform as well. But as I mentioned, we'll start using this churn prediction use case. So let's click into this one. And we'll land on this model overview page. And so really think about this page as one, it's Arize telling you what we received. And so you'll see that we're using the last 30 days as a default time period. You can look at other time periods here, but it's quite useful to know, okay, here's how many predictions we've sent to the platform. We have a metric kind of flagged below with accuracy. And then down below here, this is really the data that's relevant to the platform. So think about predictions. Actuals, you might know that as a better term for ground truth, or what was actually occurred. Did this customer churn? Did they not? And then the model schema around the 23 features. Note that we auto discover schema. So if you have features that change or even reintroduce themselves, we'll auto detect that as well. On the top here, you'll see that we're still flagging, hey, we got the data into the platform, which is great. There's a few steps we'll kind of work through now to set up our model. And then from there, we'll kind of work through a performance troubleshooting workflow. So on the top right corner, click on Setup Model. And what this does is, one, in order to kind of calculate things like drift, we'll need to have a referential baseline or data set to refer our production data against. And so we have two different options here, production, pre-production. I'm going to select pre-production. Note that, one, there's just options to use various data sets. We have various data sets uploaded here. I'm going to use the validation version 1.0, but feel free to kind of play around after this workshop perhaps and see if you find anything else more interesting within the other baselines here. But we set our baseline here. We set and confirm our time range that it's relevant for. Then from here, since we get ground truth back or actuals, we're going to start tracking various performance metrics. And so what I'm going to actually want to care about a lot is the customers that we thought were okay, they're going to renew for a year, 2 years, 3 years, but they actually churn. And so what I'm going to want to select here is false negative rate. Again, you can select other metrics. It doesn't tie you off by saying, hey, you selected false negative rate, we're not going to calculate mate, for instance. You can always toggle around and play with that. But we use false negative rate as our default metric. And then I'm going to want to be alerted when maybe it's over 0.3% or 0.3. And then I'm going to declare that churn is my positive class. And so from here, we now, Arize is informed to know how to calculate performance. From here, we're going to auto create a library of monitors for you, drift, data quality, and performance. And this is across not only your model level, but also every feature. And so it's really powerful from day one to just auto complete essentially monitors. And then from there, you can always tweak and hone them by monitoring particular cohorts and then set up different alerts to go to different platforms like Slack, PagerDuty, Amazon EventBridge to kick off retraining flow, etc. But overall, really useful to kind of set up monitoring from day one. You want to send an email alert, you can send that when an alert goes off as well. But essentially, we're done setting up Arize. We're monitoring our model in real time. You can actually see on the right side here where we have our monitors declared. And if I zoom in a little bit for kind of screen shares, you'll see that we're actually already in a triggered state. So we actually have a false negative rate above my threshold that I set. So let's kind of investigate what's going on within that monitor. And so it'll take me into my performance monitors section. I can review my monitor rate, and clearly we're at a very high false negative rate across our model here. And so really this is where monitoring in a lot of organizations with in-house tools where you monitor your models stop. You get that red light, green light, okay, false negative rate has spiked, but really with observability, it's knowing what to do next and really figuring out what's going on here. And so what I can do is I can click on this blue button here. It says troubleshoot model performance. And so within any alerts here, we're going to send you into, for performance, we're going to send you into performance tracing, because what I want to do is start decomposing this overall metric of 40% false negative rate and figure out, okay, there's got to be different pockets, cohort segments within my model where perhaps we're doing really well and we actually have lower false negative rate than that. And then there's going to be places we're going to want to focus on because our model is struggling with. And so what we can do is review this screen here. We'll visualize kind of the metric over time. You can see that we had a spike, we kind of evened out here, but that's still above kind of our ideal false negative rate. So let's kind of figure out what's going on down below here. This model has about 10 features that are relevant that the model uses, but you can think about kind of models where you have 50, 100. One of the most useful things around kind of the performance breakdown by feature is that we auto sort kind of the top culprits. So where would you get the most bang for your buck around improving my model's performance for these particular features, for these particular feature inputs. So I don't waste my time on features that don't have as heavy influence on my model's performance. And so we're auto surfacing and sorting these to the top, like net promoter score, support eligibility. And what we're doing is we're visualizing in mini histograms here, essentially all of my inputs, and then weighting them based on the bar height as prediction volume. And so you can see that's the variance of height is prediction volume using those inputs. We'll expand those in just a second. And then the color coding, dark red, closer to red, that's going to be low performance or high false negative rate in this scenario. And then closer to white, yellow, that's going to be higher performance or lower false negative rate. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually expand out support eligibility. You can select any other feature as well as we go through this workshop. But one of the kind of key things here is that we can expand out this histogram. And what I'm actually seeing here is now all of my inputs for this string feature around kind of phone, web chat, priority, and no value. And what we're going to look for are those dark red pockets, because that's really what we're kind of where we're low performing. Because if we look at kind of my phone rate, we're kind of aligned to the false negative rate. That's our global metric, 0.38. So we're pretty good at predicting churn around phone. Maybe we can improve, but not going to be the problem child in this scenario. Compared to if we look at kind of priority here, you'll see that our false negative rate is over 90%. And so about 10% of our predictions used over the last 30 days used priority as the input for the service eligibility. And then we're pretty much saying if you have priority flagged as your input, we're going to predict that pretty much as not going to churn, but you end up churning. And so one of the questions that naturally comes up as you kind of uncover these insights, say, okay, we found one of these like segments, one of these cohorts that my model actually does struggle with. One of the first questions that might come to mind is, how did we do in training? Did we use and incorporate this input within training? Or perhaps you could also ask, how did we do this in our previous model iteration? Both of those kind of questions can be answered very easily or explored more thoroughly by adding a comparison. And so if we look on the top here, the top page of kind of performance tracing, you'll see that we're using and reviewing production, and we're using all versions of our model. And to answer or ask that question of how did we do in training, how did we do in our previous versions, all I have to do is click on this add comparison button, and I can compare any other data set, any other environment that I've sent to the platform. And so by default, we just kind of copy and paste and say, hey, you look at production, here's production as well, side by side. But now I can start exploring it. I can say production, I can say different versions. So as you kind of retrain your model, you can actually ensure that you're improving performance against this kind of input or these features. I'm going to look at training, and I'm going to zoom out here, and you're going to see support eligibility. We're going to now side by side compare our performance between these two different environments. And so what I can see is we actually did better in training for phone, better in kind of web chat as well. But you'll see that as we look at priority, we actually didn't even use that as an input in training. And so one of the things I can instantly think about is, okay, maybe our model shouldn't maybe serve if priority is the input. Or more tactically, I can also say, okay, let's start training, ensure that incorporating priority is something that we utilize within our training of our next model version. What you can also do is explore the feature a little further within the platform as well. And so what I can do is I might actually want to look at, instead of performance, I might want to look at data quality as well as feature drift. And so what I can do from the feature performance breakdown list is you'll see that all these features are hyperlinked. And so what I can do is I can click on support eligibility. We land you on a data quality page. One of the things you can see is for like categorical or string, you'll see that we track things like cardinality. So cardinality, we actually had a spike in cardinality. It increased for a little bit of time. You also see that we're getting a relative amount of high kind of empty values. So that's another thing we can also take into account for my model. And I also can toggle over into drift. And I can look at feature drift. And what we're meaning by kind of feature drift, and we can also do this for model drift, is we're going to compare the distributions against that baseline. And so if you remember in our configuration, we set it to our training data set. And so we're going to compare our distributions of our inputs for this feature in this scenario against that training data set. And visualized on this curve is our drift metric. We use PSI, it's Population Stability Index. And so right around kind of this threshold of 0.25 is where you'll start seeing the curve go to red. So if I select a period of time where there's low drift, the distances between these various inputs like phone and web chat, they're close. What we actually are getting in production versus what we set as our baseline and trained our model on is relatively aligned here. As we select a period of time where there's high drift, you'll see that really the inputs really shifted over into priority. And so really we can think about that cardinality shift of from 2 to 3 different inputs, as well as a general shift of now over 90% of my kind of distribution within production is now priority in this kind of spike in this kind of time period at the start of the month here. And so I can explore my data, my features, or my model data within kind of feature drift and kind of explore the distributions. So what you actually would have found through kind of feature drift monitors is that we would have said, hey, you have a spike in drift, and you could have found the same problem of, hey, you got a new input. You also can come and find kind of performance and tying that to feature drift as well. So kind of work through a lot of different things. I'm going to check on the Q&A to see if there's any questions here. Hopefully everyone was able to kind of follow along as we went through that kind of process here. The last thing I'll kind of tie off here before kind of one last check for Q&A is another thing around kind of what we went through is really a really quick kind of streamlined manner around understanding, one, we have a monitor that fires off, false negative rate is too high, it's not acceptable to the business. What do? We start uncovering different features, different feature inputs, and start becoming informed on, hey, here's an input we need to train on, or this is maybe a new kind of input, new priority plan is introduced by the business, but overall informing you really quickly from taking weeks to months, or even just days to really condensing into minutes to identify these issues. The last kind of dimension I want to introduce you to within this workshop is you can also do this entirely as an ad hoc analysis within the platform. And so what you can do is you can go to dashboards, and what you can do is you can create your own dashboards, whether it's kind of feature performance, you can look at kind of various models as well. And overall, this is going to feel very kind of similar to a kind of product experience with Grafana, et cetera, where you can actually create different dashboards and then you have full agency around tweaking and honing these widgets. And so this is really useful when the world is, your head's on fire, the monitors are all green, but you still want to kind of explore your model kind of in a very ad hoc manner. And so what you can do is you can come into here, play around, change any widgets, make anything kind of to your kind of liking and requirements. And then you can also kind of compare various metrics, different models, model versions, different environments that you see on the right side of the screen here. It's very easy to kind of just play around with your own data, with your own model data, and really kind of change essentially everything here. And so you can play around, configure your own widgets. It's a very user-friendly kind of experience. But the last thing I'll kind of tie off here is exporting data. We want to make sure that you have actionable items once you find insights, whether as simple as here's a new input, here's something that we need to incorporate more into training as we iterate on our new model version, or I actually want to explore this data more in a notebook environment. We can get you back into that. And so hopefully you kind of got a good introduction. There's a lot more to the platform that we didn't get to, but you feel free to kind of explore it on your own by signing up at arize.com. But yeah, that's kind of conclude generally the workshop walkthrough here. I'll kind of check on if there's any questions in the chat. And yeah. There's a few questions in chat. Looks like quick question, how do you plug your models into the service? And is the platform restricted to explainable models where features and feature importance are transparent in the model? So the first kind of question, there's a lot of different options to get the data into the platform. Go to docs.arize.com, and on the left side, there's kind of a few references. Big kind of macro picture, I would kind of say, is you can either add a little bit of code with like our Python SDK, add it into the model serving layer. That's doing kind of a stream of prediction by prediction into the platform. You could also, if you have inferences kind of in a table like a CSV and it's in Amazon S3, for instance, you can actually just drag drop essentially those predictions into the platform. We can also pull those from that cloud storage. The last one is, and this is super useful when you're doing more of a test scenario. I just want to get a good sense of the platform. So kind of if you signed up today, probably a good idea. If you have like a data frame available, we have a pandas data frame that utilizes our Python SDK, so you can kind of just send in a data frame, play around with the kind of model there. Around explainable models, maybe a better to kind of touch on a less than 4 minutes, but in short, it's ideal to have the features and feature importance. Feature importance is not, I didn't really touch on it in the platform kind of walkthrough and workshop, but know that that's not required. We can actually calculate those for you if you don't have them. So there's a lot of different options to help get you going there. There's no other question. I'm going to tie off this workshop. So again, appreciate everyone attending. Hopefully this was useful and exciting to kind of get everyone using the platform. Feedback as well. This is still a new product, our launch of our self-serve process. So feedback, product feedback, and overall excited for everyone to start using our platform.